Hey folks, David Stewart here. Thought I'd break my silence on Brand X to talk about Knights of the Old Republic, the remake. This was announced as part of some Sony thing, and I've never seen hype just inflate so quickly to such a gargantuan Zeppelin size and then just deflate and burn in a Hindenburg of despair quite as quickly as this announcement, followed by all the details that have fallen out from that. Now, where did this despair come from? Well, they announced Knights of the Old Republic. They showed a little icon for Asper Media. And then people found out who was going to be the writer for it was this person named Sam Maggs, who's an SJW apparently, and doesn't like Knights of the Old Republic. Now, this is pretty much par for the course for post-Disney Star Wars, is to hire people to work in the franchise who hate the franchise. And usually the justification I hear is that they're trying to expand, we're trying to bring it forward to make it relevant for people today and expand the audience. Like, you need to expand the audience of the most popular franchise in the history of humanity. This is the most popular thing besides like the Bible or, I don't know. Its only competitors are like Lord of the Rings and Harry Potter, really. Star Wars is big. It's a big franchise. Do you really need to expand the audience more than it already is? Probably not. But that's usually the justification. And of course, that means you actually shrink the audience because you start cutting out the normies, and the normies are where the money is. Anyway, so yeah, that's what the focus has been on. But I want to point out that the fact that they hired a writer at all should have been the big warning flag, regardless of her credentials or whatever bad things she happens to have worked on in the past. The fact that they hired a writer for a KOTOR remake should have been a red flag. Why? Well, there's literally dozens of hours of pre-written, pre-recorded dialogue from the original Knights of the Old Republic. Maybe you need somebody with a writer's mentality to do the editing or something. There could be a small amount if you're going to completely remake the game like Final Fantasy VII style, where it's just a different game. And in fact, that's what we ought to expect at this point, is that they're not remaking Knights of the Old Republic. So if you're a fan of Knights of the Old Republic, which I am, it's one of my favorite games, you're not going to get, you're not getting a remake that is faithful to the original. Rather, you're probably going to get something that's more akin to a reboot. It has the name. It'll be called Knights of the Old Republic, but it will not be Knights of the Old Republic in any kind of meaningful way. And this, I guess there's a little bit of a side discussion here, which is, what does remake even mean in terms of video games? Because we have remakes that are like the Demon's Souls remake, which is pretty much a one-to-one remake where they replace the graphics, and it runs with higher quality graphics at 60 frames per second, but has more or less the same controls. There's a couple of little gameplay things that are slightly different, but it's Demon's Souls. It's pretty much the same game. Maybe you can argue that the aesthetic changes were not what you like, but it is a remake of Demon's Souls, pretty much one-to-one. What a remaster is, where like you do something like with Final Fantasy X, where you replace some of the graphics, you update some of the models, but it's really the same game. The UI is maybe change the scaling for HD displays or something like that if you have a remaster. And then you have something like Final Fantasy VII-R, the remake of Final Fantasy VII, which I don't even know if it qualifies as a remake. It has different gameplay. It even has a different plot. It takes 1/3 of the plot, just the Midgar of the original Final Fantasy VII, and makes a new game sort of out of that story. So I don't even know if remake even is appropriately applied to Final Fantasy VII, especially if you're comparing it to something like Demon's Souls. So what if you were expecting, if you're a fan of KOTOR, you should expect something closer to a reboot, closer to that Final Fantasy VII remake. Now, I like the Final Fantasy VII remake. I thought it was a really fun game. I understand why a lot of fans didn't like it, because what they wanted from a Final Fantasy VII remake was Final Fantasy VII with newer, better graphics, updated UI, but the story that they're familiar with and the story that they like. And indeed, a lot of fans were let down by the Final Fantasy VII remake because it was so different. I was like, I actually really like that it's completely different gameplay, because I'm kind of the feeling that I can just always go back and play the original if I want to. If I'm buying a new game, I would really like it to be new. But when it comes to Knights of the Old Republic, this isn't something that I would just buy day one because it says Knights of the Old Republic on it or something like that, because you know it's going to be completely different from the original. It's not going to be the remake that you want it to be. And so that's something that I think everybody should be aware of. By the fact that you hired a writer when you have dozens of hours of pre-recorded dialogue really means that you're not getting a remake. You're getting something else with the same name. Likewise, BioWare is not making it. BioWare hasn't really had a good track record of making good games anyway for about really 10 years now. I'm trying to think what their last good game was. Maybe Mass Effect 2? As far as games that I thought that I liked, that I enjoyed, it was probably Mass Effect 2. So that I think was 10 years ago. So even if BioWare was making it, I think everybody who made Knights of the Old Republic has moved on. And anyway, so you're going to get different people making it. You're going to have different people involved, not the original creators. And then you're going to have, who knows, when it comes to the writing. So that's the main thing that I wanted to point out, is that it's not going to be a remake like you want, guys. It's going to be a different game, and probably not a good one. And my prediction would actually be, in 2021 or post 2020, remaking any game that is like Knights of the Old Republic, they're going to dumb it down significantly. Knights of the Old Republic was based on a D20 style system. I'm going to call it D20 style. It's not D20 exactly because it's got its own stuff, but something that's derived from D&D, Dungeons and Dragons, which uses a D20 for lots of different things. And in fact, you had a D20 systems that you could apply to different settings and things, kind of like GURPS. I don't know if everybody remembers all the D20 or the D12 systems from days of yore, but they were a thing. So that was that in video game form. So if you look at your character sheet, you could decide, how much strength do I want? How much of these stats do I want? What feats do I want to pick? That kind of stuff. All of that is RPG heavy, and late 90s to early 2000s RPGs like Dungeons and Dragons Edition 3 or 3.5, which has a lot of complicated multi-classing kind of stuff. The character build stuff is really complicated in those editions of D&D, and that's a lot of what I think inspired the systems of Knights of the Old Republic, were those RPGs of that era. Well, they're kind of complicated to wrap your mind around, and you have to stop and think about what those things mean, and you have to learn the systems if you want to excel at the game. They're going to cut that right out. They're going to dumb it way down. They did this with Dragon Age Origins, right? Dragon Age Origins was the most popular PC game that BioWare ever put out. It was their best-selling PC game. And what did they do with Dragon Age 2? They consoleized it, as we said back when it came out. So they dumbed it down. They took out all of the cool and kind of complicated game systems that underpinned Dragon Age Origins, which is, again, at least inspired by D20 style systems, and just replaced them with really simple, stupid trees that you just went through in linear fashion. Really boring combat that had flashy animations, but was just nowhere near as fun as Dragon Age Origins in terms of tactical control. They really tried to dumb it down to make it popular for other people. And was it as successful as the original? The answer is no. So what tends to happen is you take something that's popular and they go, well, how can we make it even more popular? Rather than going, we should take that thing that's popular and do more of it and see if more people can be interested in this thing, which is already popular, and build on it. Instead, they're like, well, we need to dumb it down. We need to find a way that people who have an IQ of 65 can play this game. Because if you go down to the lowest common denominator, if someone who has an IQ of 70 can play it, definitely someone who has an IQ of 120 can play it. Problem is, the person who has the IQ of 120 is going to be bored to death by systems that are appropriate for children or stupid people. And so that's what I expect with KOTOR, is no RPG systems whatsoever related to that. So if you liked that aspect of character building and maybe, balancing your character stats to be able to do different things like persuade people, that's you're probably just going to miss. It's probably just all going to be missing from from that. And I think a lot of times you look at something like Skyrim, which had really dumbed down systems compared to its predecessors, and you're like, well, that's what we should do because Skyrim was the most popular. So they'll definitely, my predictions, they'll do things like that. So the gameplay, I imagine, will be quite dumbed down, as well as a new story that's different and probably bad and probably insulting and probably has a meta-narrative about how Star Wars sucks or something like that. I think none of that stuff would be out of the range of likelihood. So thanks so much, guys. Leave me your thoughts down below. And don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. And let me know what you want to see or hear in the future and what your thoughts are about the future of Knights of the Old Republic. I will end by saying this. You can buy KOTOR on Good Old Games. Or you can buy it on Steam for like $10. Now, you do probably have to patch the PC version. Last time I played, you had to patch the PC version for it to run on a widescreen monitor because it was originally done for like ye old 4x3 Xbox and PC. But it's really not that hard to do. There's a couple little easy patches that you can apply to make it play on a modern system. Or you can buy it on Android for like $10 and just play it on your phone. And on your phone, you're probably not going to notice the limitations of the graphics quite as much. Yeah, it's a PlayStation 2 era graphics or Xbox One era graphics, but the aesthetics are on point. The models are not high poly count models compared to today's models, but it's a perfectly playable game in 2021. Not only is it perfectly playable, it's still really fun to play that game in 2021. So there's really no reason to not play that. Or you could also play that, and if you like it, you could play the sequel. You're like, man, I want more of this. You could play Knights of the Old Republic 2, which has the same basic game systems and gameplay with a new, different story. So you could just go back and play those games instead of buying the remake. So that's all I'm really going to say about that. Hope you guys have a great one, and I'll see you next time. Newest book's actually on Kindle Vela, but I'll make a separate video on how Kindle Vela has actually gone, and we'll talk about that in the future. It hasn't gone that great, but you can still read that book called Bright Children on Kindle Vela for now. People have been asking, are you going to put it out in a regular format? Chances are yes, just because of how Vela has gone. So thanks so much, and I will see you all next time.